let's dive into some spring football. Today we are bringing on one of my favorite guests. You guys all know him, you love him, love his work. Tyson Alger. Tyson, what's up, man? How we doing?
I'm good, man. Like hearing spring football already, like kind of sends like a mixture of like excitement and like chills down my like I just got out of hockey mode, man. Like I've been able to enjoy the Olympics for the last 2 weeks, but it's football season, baby, and I'm excited for this one.
It's like both a little bit too soon, but also I'm excited for it because we finally have something to do again. I
Yes.
don't know how I feel about it.
I just don't have the bandwidth anymore right now for like the preseason like
Yeah.
rankings or
I'm so tired of it.
we all do the same stuff. We do like
Yeah.
the schedule comes out. Here's my rankings of the. It's just going to be nice to talk to some players and talk to some coaches and especially with this Oregon spring that you have such kind of hype for next season, but also like there's a lot of changes that have happened too. So like I think this is a very important spring for the Ducks coming up.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to bring you on. I think this is our third straight year of doing this kind of off-season, storyline look ahead. Today we're going to do the same thing. We're going to dive into the spring and summer storylines. It's not going to be a draft. It's not going to be like predicting headlines like we've done in the past, but I simply want to talk about the upcoming news items that intrigue us the most. Before we do that, though, you have had a change as far as publications go since we last had you on. So if you would tell us, just update us where people can find your work.
Yeah, I'm just writing letters home to my mom now. Like I no, no. So after 4 seasons of doing the Ducks just on the I-5 corridor, I joined Lookout-Eugene Springfield back in August. The corridor still lives in some form, but it's more Portland centric and about the Timbers and our podcast. But all my Ducks coverage has been at Lookout-Eugene, which was definitely like a change this year to go from like not having a boss for the last 4 years and being on your own schedule and kind of being in control of everything to kind of like being back as a part of a staff. But it was incredibly rewarding this year. I mean, just being independent was I learned a lot from it, but it was just incredibly challenging and especially financially. And I was just thinking about this like past season and like the trips that like we went to Penn State, we went to the bowl games, like I had an editor and a photographer. And so like it was just nice to be back on like a full team where you have like support and um, it's not just me taking iPhone pictures and trying to write my way out of it.
Absolutely. Well, we're happy that you're somewhere and still doing this. It's great to have your coverage. As our guest, I'm going to let you go first. What are you most intrigued to watch and follow and see this spring and summer?
I'm fascinated with like the switchover of coordinators. This
Okay.
was
Mhm.
such a continuity item that the Ducks had the last 3 4 years. Tosh has been on with Dan since the start of his time, and I guess you had two offensive coordinators, but Kenny Dillingham to Will Stein was a pretty smooth transition, and Stein had some success with the Ducks, but um, I I'm very intrigued at just the relationship that Dante Moore and Drew Mehringer can develop with each other. I think for maybe people outside who just look at like titles and they're like, how is this guy going to all of a sudden be like the quarterback guru for Oregon? Wasn't he coaching tight ends last? But Drew's got such a fascinating career in that. He's been an offensive coordinator, I believe, twice before. One of
Mhm.
those times at James Madison was incredibly successful, and then when he went to Rutgers, I think he was the youngest Power Five coordinator
Mhm.
in the NCAA at the time, and it just wasn't like a great fit. Like he's kind of running a modern spread type of offense, and he went to Rutgers, and they were pro style, and they
Yeah.
don't quite have the talent that the Ducks do, and so you know I. I'm very intrigued to like learn like what he kind of has learned about himself and like as like a play caller and a coordinator and why he thinks like 10 years later, not only can he like be the guy, but like it's like the guy. Like, it's like
Yeah.
this is the Oregon team that's going to be preseason top five. You have the best quarterback in the country returning, and that doesn't happen if Dante hadn't already developed some sort of relationship with Drew and kind of like believed in that and bought into that system. So, obviously on defense that's important too. But I think the big storyline for this year for Oregon is definitely Dante Moore and who's his quarterback whisperer. Why does Dante believe that he can get better here with a different coach? I just think that's fascinating to me, especially for like an Oregon offense that, despite how angry people get on a line for like 1 or 2 games out of the year. Like Oregon offense has been humming for the entire Dan Lanning
Yeah,
period, and that's with 3 different quarterbacks. That's with a wide array of injuries and different pieces that have been kind of like the go-to guys in terms of skill position. But yeah, I just want to see um, how much they believe that like the continuity of keeping somebody like Drew in and promoting him to that coordinator position pays off versus, I thought Oregon had the ability to do a larger national search for this position than they did when they hired Will Stein in the
definitely.
first place. Dan Lanning's a far more um, provable product as a head coach than he was when he hired Will Stein, and that turned out to be a great hire too. But Oregon had an undefeated season 2 years ago. They made it to the semifinals last year. Like this is a very sought after title. And I think they probably could have gotten almost anybody that they wanted for it, really. And they decided that the best guy was in house, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing you can say positively about Drew right now is that Oregon could have had just about anyone they wanted to be their offensive coordinator. This is a spot with high expectations. I mean, the last two guys to have it have gone on to run their own programs and at kind of their dream schools. So,
Yeah,
yeah, Mehringer is stepping into a place where, there are high expectations, but because Lanning chose him and because he didn't go with an outside hire, I think they feel that confident in him. And there's also the story of defensive coordinator too, which you touched on. Like I'm far less. I wouldn't even say concerned. I'm not concerned about the offensive coordinator spot. I'm just far less interested. Isn't even the right word, but I'm so confident that Chris Hampton is going to be that guy. I just think that he's a very good coach. He's done it before at Tulane. I think he's going to be a great coach. I'm just curious what Drew Mehringer does there. I'm really curious what his offense looks like. How is it different? Is it the same? I mean, going from Dillingham to Stein, it's kind of just, it was Stein
yeah.
was Dillingham 2.0. It was the same scheme. It was, a little bit wrinkles here and there, but what does Drew bring? Is it more of the same or does he do something new? Is it more tight end centric because of his history as a tight end coach? I don't know. But yeah, that's probably the number one thing to watch. But I also don't know how much we'll see of that this spring. Like, are we still
Yeah,
going to be
yeah,
sitting
right.
here this summer? Like, what does this offense look like? I don't
I
know.
mean, when is your 3 hour sit down with Dan and Drew to go over the playbook? And like I'm still trying to get that on the calendar, but we'll see.
There's an unanswered text somewhere in my phone that's asking for a sit down, but we'll see when that gets answered. I don't know. I'm going to stay on the offense with my first one, and Oregon fans have such a weird, perverse fascination with backup quarterbacks that I'm going to talk about Dylan Raiola. And I don't know how healthy he's going to be. I don't know if he can participate fully in spring football. I want to see what he looks like if we get to see him at all. He's probably the best backup quarterback in the nation right now. And this is the second time in a row that, or second time in 3 years that Oregon's had the best backup quarterback in the nation. What does he look like? How good is he? How capable is he of taking this offense next year after Dante leaves? And knock on wood, hopefully not this year if he needs to. But what does he look like? He did not have to come to Oregon. He could have gone a lot of other places and played right away. So I just want to see how healthy he looks, and hopefully we get to see him in the spring game and kind of let him air it out a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating quarterback room they have now because I mean, in one sense, you kind of go like, okay, Oregon's doing the same thing they did with Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore, but the difference between that is Dante had what 5 career starts under his belt when he
Mhm.
transferred to Oregon, and I believe he was still 18 years old. Like he was still like a very, despite getting thrown to the wolves like right at UC, like when he got to UCLA, he was still a very young, raw, needed to be kind of polished product. And um, Dante ascends to the starter. He has the season he did last year, and you're like, okay, here we go again. But what's just crazy about it is I believe they have between Dante and Dylan, they have about the same amount of career starts now. They've
Mhm.
thrown for about the same amount of yards. They're in the same vicinity of like touchdown passes. Like, uh, I feel like Raiola gets kind of extra criticism levied his way just because of the Mahomes thing, and people
Yeah.
can identify with it, like, who's this Nebraska quarterback that's like basically mimicking Patrick Mahomes. But he's been a pretty darn good quarterback for the first 2 years of his career. And for Oregon to have that transition piece for next year is huge. But also, you know, knock on wood, I'm not predicting anything here, but the Ducks have had an incredibly good run of health with their quarterbacks lately. I mean, other
Yeah.
than, the Bo Nix miss a series against Oregon State during his first year, like they've they've been incredibly healthy for the most part, other than like nicks and bruises. Like they haven't had to miss any time. But you just look at this schedule now, and if you want to win a national championship, that's 16 games. That's a lot of
It's a long
football.
time.
That's as many games as NFL teams play minus one. And so I think, for a team like Oregon where the window is open every year and you have the
Mhm.
ability you don't necessarily have to peak with your roster every year. Like you're just kind of going to be able to be in there and compete. Having a guy like Dylan, I think, is just like an awesome safety valve to have, because like there is a chance that Dante gets hurt. And just about any other time in Oregon history, maybe other than when Dante was the backup, like the Ducks have somebody that they can throw in there and go like, okay, we can still maybe like do our game plan a little bit around like what the backup quarterback's doing. I
Mhm.
was trying to think of like when Oregon's had a backup quarterback situation this sound. And um, I mean, I guess like Anthony Brown and Tyler Shuck like ended up both being okay in the long run of their career, but neither of
Yeah.
those guys were playing to that level, like,
Mm-mm.
when they were at Oregon. Maybe like Marcus Mariota, Brian Bent. I don't know. Like it's
Didn't
been a long time.
didn't
It's
Herbert
it's
back up Breakout for a year?
He
Who did
did.
Herbert started as a
I
freshman?
mean, I
I
mean, I
forget.
mean, no, he was a true freshman, but also like we just thought he was like fourth string on the depth chart,
True.
and,
Didn't know
so
didn't
like
know him. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, so I just think it gives not only Oregon like a player that they can build around, and that could be incredibly good next year just based on his sheer talent. But I think it helps him out for this season too. And also like this spring, I'm just intrigued to see how Dante kind of handles the reverse role of, he
Mhm.
knows what it's like to be the guy who is sitting there and having a guy play over him that, I bet you if you ask Dante down like in his heart, I bet you Dante thinks he could have been as good as Dylan Gabriel was that
I
year.
think
But
he does,
they
yeah.
figured out they figured out a way, and I think that's really kind of valuable experience for Dante to have gone through too, as they go about kind of like tag teaming this position.
Well, and what's funny is you're talking about the rankings that we all put out this time of year. We did a quarterback ranking in the Big Ten earlier this month, and I was considering, I was like, how high would Dylan Raiola be on this list of head of other starting quarterbacks in the Big Ten? It's like, he's not top 10, I think, but he's higher than some of the other starting quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now, and that's Oregon's backup. So good position to be in. What is
Yeah,
your
and
next thing?
oh,
Go ahead.
oh, and I was just going to add like one more thing to that too. And like what I thought was really encouraging about how good Oregon was last year is Moore was great. Like I don't have his stats in front of me, but for like a sophomore year, first year with the team, like he was fantastic. But
Mhm.
also like it wasn't close to like a Heisman caliber season. It wasn't a Marcus Mariota. It wasn't even like peak Herbert or Bo Nix seasons. And
Totally.
Oregon was still really good last year, man. They only
Really
lost to the
close.
best team. They only lost to the best team in the country. And so like what has me excited about is it used to feel like Oregon had to peak when it had a peak quarterback. And I still think Oregon has the potential of having two peak quarterbacks right here. Like this could be Dante Moore's Heisman season. But I think that's just extra on top of like what's turned into like just a year in and a year out, like very sound roster that can kind of compete with whoever is playing the position.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, your next one.
My next one is going to be, hey, there's so much experience coming back on the defensive line, right? Like that's great. You got Amari Washington coming back. You got Bear Alexander coming back. You got Mateo coming back. I know he's not technically a defensive lineman, but you got Tatum coming back. Like you have
Mhm.
all of these like awesome pieces that the production you're going to get. Like there's no like, oh, I wonder how that's going to look. Like these guys have all been proven effective Big Ten players that have shown up in big time situations. I'm a little worried about the depth there, or just like the guys behind, because like the one
Interesting.
area
Yeah,
that we kind of saw an exodus during the transfer portal is you have a whole bunch of like really talented guys who want to play, and hey, this is great news. Everyone's coming back. All the starters are coming back, but oh, that roadblocks me a little bit. And so Oregon
yeah.
saw a lot of attrition on the defensive line, and they've
Bloody Sunday.
obviously, yeah, they
Yeah,
they
like
obviously
6
add
transfers in an hour.
yeah, it's like good luck updating your piece,
Yeah,
like as
it's
that's all
tough.
coming through. So like while I think Oregon's ones this year, and this is like across the roster, I think Oregon's ones this year are as good as they've probably, peak level Oregon teams. But I think what has really kind of separated the Dan Lanning era has been just the depth. It's not just like the
Mhm.
first unit, it's the second unit, and the quality. And we just talked about injuries at quarterback, but you're going to get injuries on the defensive line. You're going to get injuries in the front seven, and being able to like swap guys in or be able to like rest guys, or just be able to rotate that in, like I think has been so effective for them the last 3 or 4 years. And so I'm not necessarily like worried that they're not going to have that this year, but like there's just a lot of new guys to know, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of players that are going to have to gel together. And you do have a new defensive coordinator, and even though that he's coming through the system, there's just like a bit of change. And so like I'm intrigued to see like who are some of kind of the standout guys behind the Amaris and Bears that are kind of like pushing themselves forward this spring.
Yeah, it's like DeAndre Robinson. Like, what can you be from North Carolina? Can you be what Tion Gray was or Terrence Green was last year? Someone like Aiden Breland, can you step up and be the
Yeah.
5 star that people thought you would be coming in? Not that he's been bad so far, it just hasn't had much run. So, yeah, I think that's one of the more intriguing things to watch, as this offseason plays out and going into the season for sure.
Because like I also, I just talked about like how those guys have kind of like penciled in experience and stats, like the ones, but like I think it's important for those guys to get pushed too. It's complacency is the enemy of whatever cliche you want to throw in there. And not that I think like these guys are going to get complacent, but I think just, I think Dante Moore is going to be better this year because I think Dylan Raiola is going to be really good behind him and pushing him. And I think you need that all across the roster.
Completely agree. My next one, I feel like we learned last year for the first time. I mean, Dan, since he came to Eugene, has always said, we've heard it a million times, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Last year, we saw it because we saw so many true freshmen actually play and have meaningful roles in the running back room, wide receiver, on defense, at cornerback. Who are the true freshmen this year that break
Yeah.
out and establish themselves? Are there any? I mean, this team is pretty young and pretty established, but are there guys like, there's 5 star Tank Jones on the defensive line. You got running backs, receivers, like there's a million. I
Which
mean,
by
this
the
is
way,
a
like fantastic name for a 5 star guy, Tank
oh,
Jones. Like come
awesome.
on.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, there was more 5 star signees in this class than Oregon has ever had before. You're telling me that like one of them isn't going to pop this year and have a role like Jordan Davison or De'Aaron Hill did last year? Like, I'm just very curious to see who are the guys, because we kind of heard some buzz in fall camp last year that even a non 5 star like Brandon Finney or Jordan Davison, they're like, oh, they're starting to turn some heads. These guys are really good. It played out that way. Obviously, we knew about Decorian Moore. What does Jalen Lott do this year? What does Kendra
Yeah.
Harrison do this year? Like, I'm very curious to see if any of these young guys are good enough and can play a lot as true freshmen.
Well, and what I was so impressed with last year too was, I mean, we're at this point we're used to talented true freshmen coming into Oregon. I mean, like just with the way they've been recruiting, that's kind of like the norm these days. But I think last year, more so than any other year that I've covered the Ducks, was just like the maturity and leadership some of those guys came in with. I mean, it
Mhm.
was from like spring ball last year that guys were talking about how Decorian Moore came in and had already like taken it upon his shoulders and wasn't playing like an 18-year-old, and it kind of become a leader of that defensive group, or sorry, wide receiver group. And then like throughout the season, as you saw, like Finney become one of the best cornerbacks in the country. I mean, we don't always get to talk to true freshmen, right? And like it's
Exactly.
we had I think it was Moore and Finney within like successive weeks, because like I think in this era, like if these guys are going to be focal points of your team, like they kind of have to take upon all the responsibilities. And I just love the way that those two hit the ground running, and kind of, they're going to be here, knock on wood, for 3 years. And I
Mhm.
think like in this day and age, it's turning into a little bit more like college basketball, where freshmen can kind of come in and not necessarily like make it their team right away, but like instantly like insert themselves into like that type of role. And so, um, there's a lot of talent coming in, but I think what I'm intrigued to find is just like who are the personalities that like want it more, or like want to
Mhm.
be those guys. Because I think just kind of with like the proof of concept you saw last year too, like you're just gonna see more of that as well.
if you had a prediction, who is the true freshman that does kind of establish himself this year?
Mm, I don't know. Where are you going with this one?
I'm actually going with a non-5-star. I think Tre'Davious Ball, the running back.
Yeah, I do. I
I
was watching that. Yeah.
I talked to Kenyon Barner at the Peach Bowl, and he's like, "Man, this guy is one of the best running backs I have ever seen coming out of high school. He's going
Yeah,
to
but
be
what
that
what does
Jordan
Kenyon know
Davison."
about running backs? You know,
True,
it's
yeah,
not like
he doesn't know
he's
much
not
about
like
football in general.
yeah.
I mean, he was.
He's just a media guy now. You know,
It's true. We saw Tre'Davious at the Saturday Night Live camp a couple of years ago, and he was the one that stole the show. I mean, he was an incredible player. They're playing as a receiver and not a running back, too. So he's someone that I'm incredibly excited to see. But, there's a million guys that you can look at, like Tre'Davious or Jalen Lott, Kendra Harrison on the
yeah,
offensive side of the ball. Like, those are all guys that could pop.
yeah. I don't hate any one of those.
Okay. All right. No, it's my next one. Isn't it? Or is it your next
Or
one?
no, I think I'm
No,
up
it's
because
yours.
you.
It's your final one. Your
Um,
final one.
yeah, my final one's just kind of a little bit broader, but
Mhm.
this is going to be the second spring in a row where Dan's going to have to answer questions about what happened in the last game and
Mhm.
why after such a good season like it ended in such fashion. And the one thing that I've been pretty impressed with Dan over the last 2, 3, 4 years has just been, you climb that mountain and it seems like such a grind. And like we see in the Ducks versus them, kind of a look into just like how much kind of effort that they put into each week and kind of like building the story and motivating those guys. And um, I just think, it's 2 years in a row where like it's been fantastic seasons ended by devastating losses. Like I would think that at some point that's got to wear on a guy just from these are year-long seasons when you take into account like recruiting and spring football and then like the build-up. This is going to be the third year in a row of Lanning being kind of like right in the center of the spotlight of, here's this coach who's been kicking butt on the recruiting trail. He's won more games in 4 years than Chip Kelly did. At what The storyline's still going to be around him this year because people are going to be like, at what point does Dan take that next step and like win one of
Mhm.
these? I hate doing the like win one of the big games because like this dude beat
Yeah,
Ohio State at Autzen, like he smoked
that's
Texas
fair
Tech in
though.
the Orange Bowl. Like we're relatively selective in when we choose to say a guy hasn't won a big game, but the last game of the season was always the one that people remembered the most. And I'm intrigued to see like his energy and his messaging and like kind of the way he packages together like this season as a whole. And so much of that planning starts in the spring and just kind of like setting the tone for things. Um, but yeah, it's just like Dan's kind of a storyteller. Like he's a messenger. Like he likes
Yeah.
to pick a theme for the week. And this is going to be kind of like the third, fourth year of like, okay, guys, we're incredibly good. We have these expectations. Like, do things change in the spring? Like has he identified things that like, hey, here all the way in March we can do this different and that might impact us better when it comes down
Mhm.
to January? Like I don't know, but that's what we're here to find out.
It's kinda like, how many times can Sisyphus keep pushing the rock up the hill
Yeah,
and
right.
having it fall back down on him? Like, that's a very interesting thing to watch, but I mean, we could go into this media side of things. Like, I don't know how like, what type of answers we would get if asking this stuff or, like, how to properly formulate these questions. It'll be interesting to
You'd
see
you'd
how he
you'd probably
says
get a
it,
few seconds into formulating your question, and then he would take it in a
and then he
different
would
direction.
stop you. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah, I
He,
mean,
he's he's a stopper. He's a defensive
he's a stopper.
minded head
That's true.
coach.
That's true. All right, my final one. You went broad with your final one. I'm going to go a little bit more specific and a little bit more pertinent to the news of the week. The NFL Combine is starting this week. I'm curious later this spring, how many first rounders can Oregon have in the draft? The record for Oregon is 2 first rounders. They've done that, I think, 3 times before. You're likely to get 2 again this year. Could you get
Who we got?
3 maybe?
We got
Sadiq,
Sadiq.
and then it's either Emmanuel Pregnon or Dylan Thieneman. Both have been mocked, but I have not seen many mocks with 3. I've seen most mocks that have 1 or the other. So I'm just curious. We'll see how they look at the combine this week. We'll see how they look at pro day in the middle of March in Eugene. I'm just like I think they could get 3 if you have the right teams picking, but I
It's
could see it being 2.
it's fascinating because like if you were to take those three, would you say that that's the best high end Oregon draft? That like I don't know if those three are better than maybe the top three players that Oregon had in last year's draft, but like sometimes that's like how it plays out, right?
Probably, but then you also look at the guys who came back for another year, and you could have Dante Moore as a first rounder. You could have Amari
Yep,
Washington as a first rounder. I
yep.
mean, Mateo was early on considered to be in that realm. I don't think he would go if he had actually declared, but the guys that held back that could have been at least in this conversation, it makes it even more wild. But I'm curious to see how many guys they get there. They're sending 8 to the combine, which is not a record. They sent the record 12 last year. They might break a record for the first rounders, though. That's something I've got an eye on.
I'm just excited to see like what happens with Bryce. You know, like that he's been one of my favorite storylines to cover at Oregon, and um, there's part of me being like a big baseball fan. Like at one
Mhm.
point, I want one of these guys who like do both to like choose baseball. Like we lost Kyler Murray, we like you lost Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
Um, but what's fascinating with Bryce is like by the time he got drafted by the Astros, like I mean, he was a good football player by then, but like at no point do I think
he wasn't
anybody was
this.
thinking that like,
Yeah.
hey, 7 months from now, you're going to go to the NFL Combine, and you know, and like I also understand like if you have the opportunity to be a pro football player and a pro baseball player, football can seem more attractive just because it's like if you make it, you make it. Like there's not like a
Mhm.
4 years of toiling around the minor leagues just to see if like
Mhm.
uh, how you develop. Like if you're good enough to be in the NFL, traditionally you get in there right away and you can kind of start making money right away. But
Make some money.
I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know Bryce loves baseball. I had fun talking to him during pack or Big Ten media days this year. Just about, I was asking him like, how often, like since you've added the football weight, like how often have you gone to the cages? He's like not quite as much as I used to, but he's like when I make contact, like the ball sounds a little bit different. You know, he's added probably
It's
15-20 pounds to like his baseball playing weight. And I'm just curious to see like how he handles all that. Cause Bryce isn't gonna be a first round pick. He's not gonna be a
no,
second round pick, but like
be a day 3
I
guy
I
probably.
yeah, but like I think he's an NFL player, and it's just I I think that's the more fascinating thing is like when you're not going to be a top round pick in either of the sport, like which one do you choose? Because it's not like I mentioned Kyler Murray, but Kyler Murray was also had the opportunity to get first round NFL money, which is significantly different than what Bryce might have down the road.
At the very least, he'll be, I think, a very tenacious special teams player, which is
Yep,
more than a
yep.
lot of people can say in this world. All right, that wraps it up for our 3. Did you have any honorable mention that didn't quite make your list?
Um, I did want to. I thought about going into the running backs, but you kind of covered that a little bit with like the freshmen
Mhm,
coming in. But like, man, like Jordan Davidson was so fun to watch last year, and I
mhm.
loved like that he came. It wasn't that he came out of nowhere, but like you go into last season and you're talking about Noah Whittington because he's returning. You're talking about Mekhi Hughes because he had rushed for what like 1,500 yards the year before at Tulane and was on a whole bunch of preseason Big Ten lists and I love that. I still love that how much, no matter how much like we cover all this and think that we're experts, like we just don't know. Like we didn't think that it was going to be true freshmen like being the best
Not at
rushers on
all.
the Ducks this year. We didn't, and like I also didn't think that after like the first 4 games where Davidson had like 8 touchdowns on like 9 carries, just turning into like Cyrus Habibi Likio on steroids. Like I didn't think that like suddenly we'd see that shift to like him becoming like essentially like the every down back, but
Mhm.
like just his speed, his like first step and read and patience, like it was that was as good of running that I've seen since probably like Royce Freeman was Oregon's running back. And
Yeah.
to be able to like have him like have that proof of concept like his first year and to get some reinforcements coming in that are going to push him and be very talented. Like I just really like where Oregon's backfield's at coming into this year, and I'm very excited to see what some of those new pieces look like come spring.
I feel the same about Oregon's safety room. I wanted to touch on that with Coy Parrish coming in. You got Aaron Flowers. Trey McNutt is supposed to be healthy now, really good. Peyton Woodyard, you got 5-star freshman Jet Washington coming in too. Like there's so much talent there. I also want to see what Iverson Hooks can do on this
Yeah,
offense. I think he'll be fun. I had one honorable mention. How does Oregon's coaching staff and football program treat the media differently with a change in the beat reporter lineup? Let's just curious to see. We'll see this spring. I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
something to watch. But
Um,
that's what I had.
the only other one I had was people who read me know that I have an affinity for goofy special teams players, like
No
whether
way.
it's talking with like the long snappers or like boy, I enjoyed the heck out of James Ferguson Reynolds like
I'm sure
this
you did.
last
Yeah.
year. You got an Australian, you got like he's a great quote. He's self-deprecating but confident. I ran into his parents before the Peach Bowl. They were like the first people at the stadium. His parents were draped in Australian flags, and like they just had like such a great time. And between losing oh my gosh, why can't I think of the long
Camden.
snapper's name? Yeah.
Oh,
Or no, um
no. God, what is his name?
I did like 3
He
sit
was like
downs with him last year.
the best long
Actually,
snapper in the nation.
yeah, this actually shows that he was the best long snapper in the nation because you only know long snappers' names when they mess up, and so
Luke Basso.
that I'm sorry,
There it
Luke.
is.
Luke, I very much
Sorry,
enjoy.
Luke.
If you're watching this, I very much enjoy talking to you. It's February. I'm not in football mind, but
Yeah.
spring has always traditionally kind of been a time where I feel like we can get to know the guys a little bit better. Media restrictions over the years have tightened that up quite a bit, but it's just spring football is a little bit of a looser time, and
Yeah.
I like learning about guys and being able to kind of explore their stories a little bit more in that time before it like just gets into you only rush for this week, or the defense looks like
Yeah.
that. Like you just kind of get into the nitty gritty during the season. So I've always liked spring because I feel like you can kind of take a little bit of a longer path with some of these players.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's close it out there. You got to get back on the road up to Portland. Thank you for coming on with us. Our annual off-season tradition of it remains strong. I encourage everyone to go to Lookout-Eugene and check out Tyson's work. It's as good as ever. I can't wait to read his stuff on the new special teams players in Eugene coming up in a few weeks. So, Tyson, thanks, man. I'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. Thanks for having me.
All right, great stuff there with Tyson. As always, have a lot of fun talking just off-season storylines with him. I think this is our third straight year of doing this. So thanks again to Tyson for coming on. Again, like I said up top, I believe Jay Stu and I will be back on together sometime next week. That's the plan. And just kind of get this thing back rolling going into the spring season and just talking about some off-season stuff and getting ready for the spring game at the end of April. So thank you guys for listening. If you want to check out more of my work, go to duckswire.usatoday.com. Follow me at Zachary C. Neel on Twitter. We'll be back on next week and get this thing going again. Until then, take it easy.